Today's case, I'm going to be talking about Jodi Arias. She was born in 1980 in California, and she has a very diverse background, including Mexican, German, and English. Her parents are William Angelo Arias and Sandra D. Arias. Arias has an older half-sister from her father's first marriage, two younger brothers, and a younger sister. Her closest playmate was her brother, Carl, who was 2 years younger than her. She claimed that she'd had an abusive childhood. She said that both of her parents began physically abusing her at the age of 7 with a wooden spoon and a belt as a form of punishment. However, her mother, Sandra, insisted that her early life had been perfectly normal. However, her mother said that she'd had some issues from an early age. She told the reporters, "Jodi has mental problems. Jodi would freak out all the time. I had quite a few of her friends call me and tell me that I needed to get her some help." Jodi Arias had a pattern of secrecy that started after her parents caught her growing marijuana at the age of 14. She also dropped out of high school and struggled to make ends meet as a waitress while dreaming of becoming a successful photographer. Jodi left home at 17 in a typical teenage rebellion phase, and she moved in for a short time with her boyfriend. She began working at what was to be a series of jobs over the next 20 years. She was very ambitious and she was highly motivated to be financially independent. She continued to live in different Northern Californian cities for several years. Jodi relocated to Southern California in mid-2000, and in 2007 she moved to Arizona. During these years, Jodi's relationship with her mother was very strained. Jodi's communication with her mother was sporadic, which is somewhat fairly typical for a 20-something-year-old who was out exploring the world. Arias and Alexander met in September 2006 at a prepaid legal service conference in Las Vegas. The connection between them was instant. However, Travis had refused to date her unless she shared his beliefs. On November 26, 2006, Arias was baptized into the Latter-day Saint faith by Alexander. As of the 2nd of February 2007, Alexander and Arias were a couple. She then relocated to Mesa, Arizona, and it was all very fast-paced, and she seemed to really dote on him, and their relationship grew rapidly. Arias alleges that the two of them broke up on the 29th of June 2007 due to trust issues, but they continued to maintain a physical relationship after she moved back to California in April 2008. And then she moved back with her grandparents. Travis Alexander's joy at meeting Jodi Arias was tempered by guilt. Him and Arias were having premarital sex, which to the Mormon Church is forbidden. It's been reported that he sometimes took out his guilt on Arias, calling her a slut in text and in emails. Alexandra and Arias dated intermittently for a year and a half, often in long-distance relationships, taking turns traveling between Arizona and California. Alexander's friends who knew Arias observed them together, and they tended to have a negative opinion of her, stating that the relationship was unusually tumultuous and that Arias's behaviour to them was worrying. Although they lived in different states, he was in Mesa, Arizona, and she was in Palm Desert, California. They maintained a long-distance relationship for a few months, and they'd meet in California at the home of Lovinger Hughes and her then-husband, Chris Hughes. But Alexander's friends said that they started noticing red flags with Arias very early on in their relationship. They'd said that they'd alerted Alexander to the concerns, that they'd grown concerned for his safety as the relationship grew toxic and volatile between the two of them. Lovinger Hughes said, "I said, Travis, I'm afraid we're going to find you chopped up in a freezer." From very early on, she was very obsessed with him, he said. As their relationship progressed, friends began to voice their concerns to Alexander, urging him to leave the increasingly obsessive Arias, who they described as being overly touchy and protective. Clancy Talbot told ABC News she just had to sit right by him. She didn't appreciate when he was talking to another female. She didn't like the fact that if there was anyone that didn't know that they were together, she wanted to make that clear. Lorinda Hughes told ABC News, I said, Travis, we're afraid that we're going to find you chopped up in a freezer. From very early on, she was completely obsessed by him. Moreover, many of Alexander's friends began to think that Arias had an unhealthy obsession with Alexander. She eavesdropped on his conversations, she looked through his emails and his social media accounts, and even forwarded emails between Alexander and other women to herself. However, Alexander insisted that Jodi Arias was a good person and that he really liked her. He eventually decided to end things, though. According to the US Sun, Alexander felt too guilty about having premarital sex to continue seeing Arias. But even after they broke up, they kept seeing each other. This made Arias' obsession with Alexander even worse. As he started to see other women, Alexander told friends that Arias slashed his tyres, hacked into his Facebook account, and harassed the women that he went out with. Sometimes she even snuck into his house. Shanna Hogan, who wrote the book Picture Perfect, the Jodi Arias story, told ABC News that sometimes he would be very angry with her and other times he would just jump right into bed with her and they would have sex. The relationship had become very toxic. Emails and texts between them from May 2008 suggest that Alexander and Arias had had a huge fight, with Alexander calling Arias a psychopath. Alexander even told his friends, don't be surprised if you find me dead one day. When Alexander broke up with Arias 5 months into the relationship, she responded by moving to Arizona and allegedly began showing up at his home unannounced. After 8 months in Arizona, Arias arrived back in California, this time relocating to Northern California. The distance was a relief to Alexander and his friends, as it was seemingly offered him the opportunity to finally move on from that relationship. He told friends, I'm getting my life back, like a whole new start. She's gone. Unbeknown to those friends, however, the two remained in contact. Arias testified in court that they continued sexting and talking on the phone in secret, and that while they were no longer in a relationship, Alexander allegedly grew very controlling of her, according to BBC News. At this point, make no mistake that this was not a healthy relationship at all. They were very highly sexually drawn to each other, and in court there was evidence presented where both parties were problematic. Furthermore, friends and family from each side spoke to the press. They gave interviews, they testified in court. It could be that these people were misquoted, gave incorrect information, and painted a picture of the other person being the villain. Arias exhibited strange behaviour before the relationship fell apart and it ended in violence. Lorinda Hughes had said that all of them were hanging out in a hot tub, just chilling out, and Arias started climbing on Alexander's lap and sucked his neck, according to his story, and Travis just kept pushing her off, and he's like, Jodi, get off me, like, what are you doing? And Lorinda went on to say that I looked at Chris and I'm like, does she not realise that we're even sitting here? Other behaviours in the case included Arias following Alexander to the bathroom and standing outside the door to wait for him. She was eavesdropping on his conversations. She was snooping through his phone, his email, his social media. Chris Hughes backed up his ex-wife's story, and he said that he and Lorinda Hughes brought their worries up with Alexander, and they told him that they believed Arias was dangerous. Lorinda Hughes said that she sensed that Arias was outside at the time when they were talking. When Alexander checked, there she was, eavesdropping on their conversation. Another friend reported red flags in the relationship as well. They said she just had to sit right by him. She didn't appreciate when he was talking to other females. She didn't like the fact that if there was somebody in the room who didn't know that they were in a relationship. There's a lot of information out there on the crime and the events that led to his murder. So I'm not going to go over it in too much detail. I might include it in a podcast in a few weeks though. In early 2008, Alexander told acquaintances that Arias would join him for a work-related conference trip to Cancun. However, Alexander asked to change the travel companion to another female called Marie. On 28th of May, a burglary occurred at Arias's grandparents' house and a gun was stolen amongst other things. There were various phone calls between the two, and Arias had hired a car. She drove to meet friends and then drove to a business meeting. She phoned Alexander and also accessed his voicemails. When she arrived for the meeting, she had different colour hair and she had cuts on her hands. On the 9th of June, having been unable to reach Alexander, a concerned group of friends went to his home. His roommates had not seen him for several days, but they believed that he was out of town and so didn't really suspect that anything was wrong. After finding a key to Alexander's bedroom, the group entered and found large pools of blood in the hallway and in the master bedroom, and Alexander's body was in the shower. The dispatcher asked when they called 911 whether Alexander had been suicidal or if anybody was angry enough to hurt him. Alexander's friends mentioned Arias by name as a possible suspect, stating that she'd been stalking him, accessing his Facebook account and slashing his tyres, as well as turning up unannounced. While the police were searching Alexander's home, they found his recently purchased digital camera damaged in the washing machine. Police were able to recover, though, deleted images showing Arias and Alexander in sexually suggestive poses taken at approximately 1:40 p.m. on the 4th of June. The final photograph of Alexander alive, showing him in the shower, was taken at 5:29 p.m. that day. Photographs moments later show an individual, which they believe to be Alexander, bleeding profusely on the shower floor. A bloody palm print was discovered on the wall in the bathroom hallway, and it contained DNA from both Arias and Alexander. I'm going to be discussing the psychology behind both of their behaviours. It is worth stating again that the only information I have to go off is what's been reported and what had been said in court. And it is entirely possible that some of these details may not be 100% accurate. If we go right back to the beginning, she claimed that she'd been abused, but her mother denies that and says that she had mental problems. Her mother said that she would freak out and her friends would call her and say that she needed help. It appears that she escalates from one extreme to the other very, very quickly. And we see patterns like this in bipolar disorder. However, we can expect some of these behaviours as being a normal part of teenage angst. She was caught growing marijuana. She left school. She left home at 17. She was ambitious and highly motivated to be financially independent. So, in other words, there were no real red flags so far. When the two of them met, it seems as though the chemistry and the attraction between them was instant. She wanted him so badly that she became a Mormon. Having sexual relations outside of marriage goes against Alexander's faith. And I think because of the chemistry was so strong between them, it meant going against his faith. So on his part, there were conflicting messages. He told her that he couldn't date her because she wasn't part of his religion. So he's holding this moral message up that his faith is important to him and Arias should be baptized. But then both now have sex outside of marriage, which goes against the faith. But that's one rule that he was willing to break. She didn't care about the religion. She was only there because she wanted to date him. Arias doesn't feel as strong about having sex out of wedlock as Alexander does, but he does it anyway. And so therefore it comes across as a mixed message. There are also reports of abusive conversations, phone calls and text messages. From his part, it is somewhat understandable that he's angry. He was acting against his faith, and that was really important to him. Arias wants to please him and wants to continue to dote on him. Perhaps she didn't really consider that the relationship would cause Alexander to feel angry and upset at himself. He may well have taken that anger out on her, and each time he does, she tries to get closer to him. They dated long distance and they'd meet halfway. This is when Alexander's friends say that she was overly clingy and possessive. She'd follow him around the house. She'd try to stay as close as possible to him. This is an insecurity. In her mind, I'm sure that she thought that the closer she got, the less likely she'd be to lose him. Then she starts taking it to more extreme behaviours. She accesses his Facebook, his phones, his emails. This is obsessive and controlling behaviour. The more extreme insecurities are seen with those who have borderline personality disorder. Borderline personality disorder usually begins by early adulthood. The condition seems to be worse when a person is in young adulthood, and the symptoms of that can include intense fear of abandonment, even going to extreme measures to avoid real or imagined separation or rejection, a pattern of unstable, intense relationships, such as idealising somebody one moment and then suddenly believing the person doesn't care enough or is cruel. They rapidly change their self-identity and their self-image. That includes shifting goals and values and seeing themselves as bad or as if they don't want to exist at all, and periods of stress-related paranoia and a loss of contact with reality. And these episodes can last from a few minutes to a few hours to a few days. There is evidence that Arias displayed behaviours which seem to align with this intense fear of abandonment or the instability and the insecurity and difficulty tolerating being left alone. When he decided to end the relationship, they continued to see each other in private. The feelings they had for each other were real. However, the more mixed signals that came from Alexander, the more Arias tried to pull him closer and tried to be part of his life. And I'm in no way at all victim blaming here. Arias had severe insecurities. She may have even had delusions that can also present with some people in borderline personality disorder. Her view of the world and the relationship was very, very different to his. It's clear to see how her behaviour spiralled. She became so insecure as time went on, more and more. This turned then into stalking. She wanted him at any cost. On the day that she killed him, she tried to destroy a camera with provocative images on them. Arias could not or would not stop fixating on Alexander. He suffered 27 stab wounds, a slit throat, a gunshot to the head. He may well have been dead at the time that the gunshot was inflicted, and the back wounds were very shallow. And this is a very frenzied attack filled with rage. It's possibly also fueled by frustration, which are feelings of why didn't he want her? Why wasn't she good enough? Why wasn't he seeing the lengths that she'd gone to be a part of his life? For her part, it was obsession. She initially denied it, and she then changed her story 3 times, saying that she wasn't there, to he was killed by masked intruders, and then on to it was self-defense and he was abusing her. She was sentenced to life imprisonment. I do hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. More importantly, as always, I hope that you've learned something new from it. Please consider supporting me on Patreon. And if you want to learn more about criminal psychology, do take a look at the website, and all of the links are in the video description. Thanks for listening then. Bye for now.